Awesome. So for those of you guys watching the recording, welcome to Wyckoff Sundays, episode 2. All right. Firstly, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of the things that we spoke about in episode 1. Firstly, I just want to say I think that episode 1 was really, really good when it comes to exactly what we wanted to do for Wyckoff Sundays. We really just spoke about the higher time frame analysis, what could potentially happen, and pretty much everything went how we spoke about we were kind of leaning towards, right? So firstly, we talked about dollar. Right. We can see that by this point, we had pretty much already seen the week before go ahead and create a beautiful Wyckoff redistribution and accumulation that turned into a distribution. And then we went ahead and saw the market trade away for the end of the week. We were pretty much expecting that to, continue down, even though there could be a lot of people who, were looking for buys, from this area here, right? We said, no, we're probably going to go ahead and see at least that low get targeted, because realistically, we are still in a downtrend. So that was a good call higher time frame wise. We did see that low get ran out. Obviously, we did end up having, price buy from there, which we're going to talk about later on. But the initial thing was, I think, very, very well done for dollar. USD currency analysis, same thing. We spoke about that continuing to boom and looking for buys on USD based pairs. Another thing that we went ahead after that, and then we also talked about as well, the imbalances that were sitting above things like Euro USD, for example. So if we look here, we drew up this blue box there. I think there's a point where we show, let me see here, where we kind of show why we marked up that zone there. Trying to, okay, maybe you guys can look at it yourself, but that zone there is basically right over here on Euro USD on the higher time frame. Right. And we spoke about, all right, can there, if we were going to see sells, we probably end up seeing sells come out of this area. So for us to go ahead and look for sells there, it didn't really make sense. So what was that an example of what we did there, right? That was an example of going ahead and setting these higher time frame targets, setting these logical areas where price should go to, even if you do feel like price will sell off, higher time frame wise, when we have zones like this one, big imbalances, right? Liquidity even sitting, here when it comes to all this internal liquidity, right? So we went ahead and made the call to see that. And then from there, potentially looking for sell-offs if the setup came. And that obviously is, the initial reaction that ended up coming in from that imbalance, right? So really, really nice, prediction there as well. And even marking up the zone on Sunday that we could potentially see the sells come from, right? So really good higher time frame analysis there as well, for US dollar currency, right? Then we went into gold, right? So we spoke about firstly, obviously that gold was ripping it. That was really, really excited. We knew a lot of people on the call even that were really, really excited about it, that have been holding gold buys for a really long time. But we also spoke about the caution, right? We spoke about the potential for obviously the gap to get filled here that we just had happen at the beginning of the week, right? We had imbalances to fill down here. We had gaps, even lower, and we pointed all that out, and we just kind of told people like, like even here, right? We were showing the gaps, that were being created there, right? So obviously, gold initially did rally, which was kind of the initial idea of what we had. We did end up catching gold there as well. If you guys want to see how we caught gold last week, based off of the Wyckoff Sunday analysis, go ahead and tap into our YouTube, right? So I do have that as a public video, which is how we caught the bottom on gold. All right. So definitely tap into that. So that was that for gold, right? So good call, because not only one, do we kind of recognize the buy opportunity early on in the week, but we also kind of spoke on like, even though things are bullish, even though things are great, everyone, gold only goes up, right? We obviously saw what ended up happening at the end of last week, right? So, again, like creating that caution. I told people like this week take partials, like like go ahead and be careful, because I feel like we're getting into that euphoric state, and I feel like that's definitely what happened. It's yet to be seen if that's going to be a shakeout, or if we're going to see a change in market, but I think it's probably a shakeout. We'll see. We also spoke about BTC, right? So we spoke about Bitcoin. We spoke about how Bitcoin, even though realistically, we spoke that we have, still bullish structure, right? We saw this previous distribution, right? That distribution turned into an accumulation at the beginning of last year. And then later on, we ended up having a distribution up here as well, seeing a clear swipe on highs, right? And then starting to see the market, trade down and everything. Since we started to, obviously come back down into these levels, right? We also spoke about the fact that, over here, we had a recent redistribution that had played out, right? So we had this accumulation here that turned into a distribution there, right? We spoke and we said that, all right, like we had this drop happen here. If we saw like, price walk up, we could look for buys, but we also said to be cautious around this area because this is where we saw the last distribution play out. And we also said that we were leaning towards Bitcoin actually going ahead and breaking below this low because of the weakness that happened there, right? Oh, sorry, no, it wasn't even there. Sorry. This is bigger time frame wise. It was over here, right? So sorry, it was just a retracement up into these levels, right? Another redistribution happened there. So we'll go ahead and tap to that part. So this was the bigger time frame, right? And then smaller time frame wise before that sell-off, here we can see we had this accumulation. We had these highs. Price went ahead and just barely took out the high of the accumulation before then trading down, right? And then we said if we did start to see price walk up, maybe this could be a sweep, right? We did end up looking for buys in there. And then when the market came up here, we saw a beautiful sell-off from that area as well. So once again, Wyckoff Sundays ended up, calling out, a beautiful setup for the week, which we can see right here. So as we can see here, we had the market go ahead and, obviously this was the same zone we were talking about before, right? Market came down. We did see this walk up. We started to look for buys. And then at the top here, we can see distribution play out inside of that previous area, right? And then at that point, we have now seen an insane move to the downside. So if you guys listen to Wyckoff Sundays, you might have been able to see something like this. And then we'll talk about what we can see potentially moving forward on Bitcoin later on, right? But yeah, really beautiful. All right. Next thing we talked about was indices. Okay. Indices. We spoke about, obviously we were bullish on them. We saw how when the market opened up, we had a huge gap down. And we spoke about ideally, for us to go ahead and really participate, we said that we wanted to see the market just come down a little bit deeper into these areas, before then looking for the buy. Honestly though, we had also said that, the low of the distribution had been taken. So we could see, the market reaccumulate from there. So that's kind of what we showed here, right? Where we had this liquidity buildup. Right. We saw the market go ahead and just barely take out the low there before then seeing the continuation. So that to me looks like an external liquidity sweep, right? It looks like a potential, again, potential for reaccumulation, sitting in that area, right? So again, really, really cool to see, I would say pretty much every single thing that we spoke about, on Wyckoff Sundays, played out, right? So for you guys, learning or, maybe you guys are trying to get better at your higher time frame analysis, definitely look at Wyckoff Sundays episode 1 because again, it was just great. I just love to see how everything played out. How really just kind of sticking to that higher time frame analysis, we can kind of see how, obviously it didn't happen right away, obviously right after market open, but as the week progressed, we kind of saw these narratives play out. We saw the buys on gold, we saw the sells on gold, we saw the buys on BTC, we saw the sells on BTC, right? Every single thing that we spoke about there. So really awesome, really cool to see, and a great learning thing for you guys as students who are looking to get better at top-down analysis. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what we could be seeing for this coming week. All right. So firstly, we have obviously, as always, we're going to go ahead and start off with dollar. Okay. Dollar is the king of the market, really. A lot of things that happen we can attribute to, dollar as well. This kind of gives us the higher time frame analysis. So it's really important to always start here when we're going to be looking for, potential setups for ourselves, right? So here when we have dollar, last week we ended up seeing the market do what we expected, which was continue to sell off, right? We saw first price kind of stall. Again, what are we doing here? We're bringing in more buyers, right? Before we end up actually seeing that huge sell-off happen, right? And we could see price just dove below, these previous lows here. Now, was I expecting necessarily the buy from here? At the bottom, me personally, no, right? Obviously bigger time frame wise, overall, I know this is so messy. Higher time frame wise, overall, we are still bearish in a way, right? Obviously, if we just look at it from the traditional, market structure style, right? This would be what we have so far, right? Low to high, low to high, low to high, right? So it's kind of creating that downtrend over here, right? Now, that being said, right, there is the possibility that we could be potentially even accumulating though on price, right? Obviously, we know accumulations look like downtrends, until they start to flip, right? We kind of get these multiple sweeps on lows, right? Happen again and again, right? And one of the key things that I personally want to see inside of things like this is, do we have signs of manipulation in each point that we're potentially looking at to be part of the Wyckoff schematic, right? On the smaller time frame. So, I would say here we do, I would say each point definitely has signs of manipulation inside of it, right? I would basically, there is basically potentially a case to be made for us to actually see, this entire zone here become a massive accumulation, right? Basically meaning that potentially, our distribution that happened here could be an accumulation there, right? Is that confirmed? No, not yet, right? But just given the what price really did last week, if we kind of look at how some of these candles were created, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and see here I'm gonna go ahead and just do one that we haven't marked up just so we can, be a little bit more clean. DXY, can we do that? Maybe index futures? No, probably not. Let's go here, US dollar index. Cool. So, so like I was saying, right, we have obviously the way that price took this low here on the daily, wasn't exactly something that inspires signs of weakness in me, right? Like obviously we can see that this is the low that we went ahead and took, but when we did so, on the daily time frame, I think we can make a real case for this actually being a potential institutional candle to the downside, right? That we hit by now, by the end of the week, we ended up completely engulfing, right? So, we kind of have this big daily down candle, right? We have the market obviously closing below this area of liquidity, right? We even have a trap candle printing right before we have that institutional candle print, right? So, if we were to look for like, signs of manipulation, I mean, that potentially gives us, some signs there. If we even look to the left here, right, we can also kind of see like we are inside of an area where previously we saw manipulation take place, right? We had here phase one, we had here phase two, right? We had here phase three and all that, right? So we had all the phases going down here, right? So, from here down to phase four. So, these are obviously the kind of areas that could see buys happen, right? If we decide not to like, sweep internal liquidity, this could be a point where, we kind of just see order flow happen, right? Obviously, if we were to sweep internal liquidity and we were to get really into those extreme areas of price, this is what we spoke about last week that we would kind of want to target potentially, for the potential down moves, right? So, like when it comes to like just from that perspective, right? Like we could definitely see this happen. But again, just seeing the way how that low happened, seeing the way how, when we really look at price over the last few weeks, I wouldn't like necessarily call this a trend, like obviously in the traditional sense, yeah, but for the most part, what is price doing, right? Price is for the most part, for the majority of these months, staying inside of, I would say like this range here, something like this, right? Like how long, and obviously we have price poking outside of it, poking below it, right? But realistically, this has really been the range, right? And how long has this been? 300 days, right? So almost a year that we've been kind of sitting in this range, right? After obviously coming off of a very expansive down move and all of that, right? So yeah, really when it comes down to it, that's kind of like what I'm, just seeing in terms of, what we've recently seen here. And obviously, the invalidation point is going to be pretty close by, right? It's just going to be right here. So it could be, like something to take advantage of potentially, right? We'll see obviously how this ends up going, but even when it comes to obviously the order flow afterwards, we kind of even see this daily down candle, right? After that daily down candle, we end up having, a trap candle actually happen there as well, right? Pretty bullish sign. So that's potentially like basically like a mitigation candle that sees us continue up, right? And then after that, when we kind of look here, even on the 4 hour, right? After having had that sweep, right? What have we been doing? We've been, really seeing imbalances consistently get accounted for, right? Imbalances being accounted for is very bullish price action, right? Because why are they going to really care about, imbalances like that if we're really, going to be, bearish, at least right now in the short term, right? So yeah, I mean, like this could potentially be cause for a buy, short term, right? Now that could be that, again, maybe we're just coming back into previous redistribution, which is kind of what we wanted at the beginning of last week. Why can't we come into here to go ahead and sell off? But I'm just talking about like, really just in terms of how the bigger picture looks, in terms of how this happened, right? It doesn't really give me confidence to sell personally, right? In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to see us gap up when we open up today, right? Given that we have liquidity sitting right here. So we shall see. We shall see. We go ahead and go to the chat. Even with everything going on with the macro, with rate cuts, etc. Yeah, I mean, like obviously that could end up being the case, right? Like, I think they probably will end up seeing those things happen, and like obviously soon, Jerome Powell is probably going to be out, and he's the one that's obviously been saying like no, but we'll see what ends up happening, with the Fed, in terms of what they end up doing, right? As of right now, there hasn't really been any action that's taken place, right? But what I do know and what I do see is everybody thinks dollar down. That's what I do think, right? I think everybody thinks dollar down, but I think that realistically we've been consolidating, right? So from a technical perspective, at least, right? So I think everyone wants dollar down. Everyone wants, to see weakness and, continued weakness, but that's where I get wary, even if it's just a sweep, even if this just ends up like maybe this does end up being an accumulation and then we end up sweeping the high of the accumulation and we get a redistribution, that could happen, right? But we don't want to get locked in on, one direction all the time necessarily, right? Because, like again, like these things can play out in different ways that we can imagine. We can still see the macro bias of dollar short while having, short-term buys to even take out highs like that one. Why not? Right? So at least if you're kind of like, like me, I would say I'm a mix of like an intraday and a swing trader, right? So, I obviously take advantage of intraday opportunities as they come and I let them become swing opportunities later on as well. That's kind of the style of trading I would say that I do, right? So if that's the case, then, like I really don't want to be again stuck on one direction, stuck on one bias, right? Obviously that being said, like that doesn't mean I'm gonna like look to short gold or things that are extremely bullish or anything like that. But like in general, like get good at playing devil's advocate, right? Get good at playing both sides of the market, while having that understanding that yes, rate cuts probably will happen, right? For all we know, they happen in Q3, you know? And then we just kind of like destroy sellers for two quarters. We don't know how things can play out. We got to kind of zoom out a little bit more, I feel like, with that, right? But all I'm looking at and all I'm talking about right now is simply just what price is showing me, right? Which is this low does not inspire weakness to me, right? I think that we have plenty of imbalance to fill, right? Even these highs were not great, right? These highs align with this one here as well, right? And then like, like just the fact that we've been ranging and we've just been sweeping out buyers and I feel like sellers have been chilling, you know? So yeah, that's all I'm saying, right? I could, I'm saying I could be wrong, right? Obviously the invalidation point is going to be pretty small, in terms of like really seeing, this low here, right? Hold, right? If that holds, then cool, right? Maybe this ends up being like, we just start to, get some market structure up. Maybe we just fill imbalance and fall. Maybe we, are on a journey to take highs. We don't know, right? Um, so yeah, just that's kind of my perspective on the situation, right? But that's kind of what I'm seeing so far, right? Like even last week, like, we did end up taking shorts on dollar, right? We took shorts on dollar here during FOMC, right? And then we just ended up buying right back up. Coming back to previous zones and buying right back up. Again, this is where that sweep really happened, right? And again, not only do we have that institutional candle there on the daily, but we actually see the fractal signs of institutional candles on the smaller time frame as we go in, right? This is also a 4-hour institutional candle, right? This is also a 1-hour institutional candle at the bottom, right? Also a 30-minute, right? Like pretty much most time frames probably have it there, right? So all I'm saying is, I'm just not seeing weakness there, right? If we get redistributions this week, like if this, accumulation that we saw happen, which really would start all the way up here, this is really just an excessive spring. Damn it. There. If this accumulation happens here, and which again, my understanding is and my idea is that most likely we will be taking out these highs here, right? Without a doubt. So the question is, from here, do we get a distribution, right? So if we hold these highs and we pull back, I think it looks great for buys. I don't think it will hold them and pull back. I think we're going to keep going. So yeah, if we do end up getting a distribution, great. We can look for some sells. We can look for some things going on. But all I'm saying is right now that this is what the market, what I'm seeing is like the way we took that low is suspect. The way how we have been ranging for a year is suspect. And so, yeah, and I also think the narrative that everyone is saying is suspect. So I just want to, personally, kind of go against that personally, right? So that's kind of my thought process here. All right. And, when we kind of look at other pairs, like things like Euro USD, right? So I think that's kind of that for dollar, right? So basically two ideas for that would be essentially us going ahead and looking in this area, all right? Seeing if we can hold here and then maybe get buys down into here, right? Or if we just wait and then eventually we end up getting a distribution type price action happen, then that would be price showing us something different. And then maybe we just continue this order flow down, right? If we don't get that, maybe this is the incentive all the way up here, right? But yeah, one thing's for sure, y'all. I mean, these are equal highs, So it's like, we'll see. We'll see. How would you define accumulation and distribution? I get it, but I want to fully understand that bit and how it can affect the market. Um, I mean, I'm gonna need a whole hour. I'm gonna need 3, 4 hours. Definitely tap into the course. All right. The course will tell you what you want to know about accumulations, distributions, reaccumulations, redistributions. And then, we'll go from there, right? And then, maybe hop on my live sessions. I could go into a little bit more. But like, yeah, I feel right now, we're not going to go into a lesson. We're going to go straight into higher time frame analysis. And I feel like I could just go on and on. But essentially, the way I see accumulations and distributions is I would define them as manipulations that happen over a longer period of time, right? Over a range, right? Where the banks and institutions get the opportunity to offload and onload, depending on whether it's accumulation or distribution, to offload or onload, their positions, right? So yeah, that's really how I would look at that. And obviously they are significant because they typically end up happening at the tops and bottoms of the market, right? When we see highs, typically we'll see distribution happen in those highs. When we see lows, typically we'll see accumulation happen in those lows. That's why they're going to be really significant. They can change market direction, right? Cool. So now let's go ahead and tap into currencies, right? So, kind of going into Euro USD, same kind of thing, right? One of the things that we spoke about obviously was that, last week was that we were getting constant reaccumulations, right? Now, that being said, a lot of the times when we see bigger time frame distributions, when we kind of zoom into those lower time frames, we'll end up actually seeing constant reaccumulations happen up until we get the UTAD, right? So my question is here, can we potentially have seen the UTAD last week, right? There is a couple of things that kind of, again, support that, right? Obviously, the range type price action supports that. The constant reaccumulations and the manipulation in each point supports that. And then again, the institutional candle that appears on the daily, right? That ends up coming back into a significant high, right? Also potentially supports that, right? I don't know if I'd use this whole zone here. I probably use this as the distribution. Sorry. So, maybe down here is where we can see things reverse, or lower, depends, right? But yeah, it's kind of what I'm seeing so far, right? Where, we are coming inside of a significant high. We did see price come into this area of imbalance that we spoke about, right? And we did see it do so with a really nice daily institutional candle. And again, here we can see a little bit clearer, the trap candle that presents after that. So now we have a daily up candle, right? We come down, daily trap candle, we come down. So, We'll see, right? We'll see. Like if price just ends up selling off and comes down to here, again, it's like not like I'm not going to be looking for buys or like, for a potential buy price action there or anything. But we're just keeping in mind like what some of these candle closures are potentially telling us, which is we might get a bigger move down here. And then when we look at the top, right? We got the 4 hour there, right? We have this 2 hour up candle here that was really clean as well, right? We have the 1 hour. 1 hour was really clean there as well, right? So just like on DXY, we see those same kind of things happen on Euro USD. And then obviously here is, London highs that go ahead and manipulate, right? We see price come down, come back into that area, take all the internal liquidity, and then continue to come down, right? This was basically our FOMC entries here, right? Price came back up into that zone, and then we ended up selling right off, right? And so far, all we're really seeing is just bearish order flow, right? Highs being taken, highs being taken, highs being taken, highs being taken. So really all we're seeing right now is bearish order flow. So once we get down and below these lows, right, maybe we can look for, signs of if price accumulates down in here, right? But as of right now, that's literally the price action that's being created, right? So who knows? Shall see, shall see. But that's kind of what I'm seeing there with Euro USD. So potentially just looking to follow up on that. That being said, there is a lot of order flow here already. So I do kind of feel like, we'll get some sweeps before we, get continuations. But obviously, bigger time frame wise, right? This is really our last point of order flow. If we want to hold order flow, then that's going to be the zone. If we want to eventually even, take all the internal liquidity, right? Maybe this high could end up getting taken all the way up until there. Then we sell off. But at that point, I don't know. I don't know if I'd like it. But we'll see, right? It's just the beginning of the week, and we want to kind of see how price action ends up playing out. I'm just pointing this out to you because that's just kind of what I see with, higher time frame to lower time frame. There are some signs that pullbacks are potentially coming, or maybe just bigger, dumps. You know, we've been rallying for a while, right? So totally reasonable to just see price go ahead and do something like that, even if we are going to be, uh, you know, long term, uh, long term bullish. Okay. So that is what I'm thinking. So Euro USD, there's that. And then, let's go into other ones, right? So let's go into other currencies first. Let's look at GU, right? GU, again, significant high, right? Big daily candle up, trap candle there, right? GU, we did manage to catch a short-term buy here, right? But then, after that, we ended up just holding the high, creating a new institutional candle up here, which we can see there. I'm going to mark it up as yellow. Right? And then we see price continue to sell off, right? So it's like, again, like we have 2 points of manipulation inside of that high, pretty strong, right? And then we have imbalances down here to fill and such, right? And again, like just seeing such an extreme area get hit as well, right? Kind of reasonable, right? We got EU. Now what else do we got? UJ, right? Okay, UJ, last week we were kind of talking about, all right, can we see, this actually hold, right? But instead we ended up coming lower. And again, same kind of thing, right? Like we actually marked up this zone down here for potential buys if price continued to come down. Just missed our area. But down here there was definitely good, buys, right? There was a reaccumulation that happened in here, right? And then we ended up buying back up. So definitely short term, I see buys continuing. But we shall see. But yeah, I definitely see this, continuing there. So potential good zones here. When I look at the 4 hour, it's just going to be that previous, reaccumulation, right? We also have a gap sitting in that area, right? So maybe that could end up being good for us. I kind of hope it just happens right off of the open, but probably not, to be honest. I feel like we'll just buy up off the open and then make this a little bit trickier. UJ, NU, same thing, right? Looking at this 4 hour institutional candle there, institutional candle here. We did call buys on NU, right? Caught a beautiful setup there as well. Where are we? We're inside a very extreme area, right? So, potentially, right? UCAD. Again, it's just like all these just really came into very extreme areas and had some big buys up. right? USD same thing. We still have all this liquidity sitting to the upside on USHEV. Granted, that could be order flow, but yo, we're in extreme areas, so that's all I'm saying, guys. That's all I'm saying. All right, just currency wise, we're just in interesting places, man. We're in interesting places. We're in scary, scary places, I guess you would say. All right, but all that can really change when we get down and maybe potentially lower. We just get reaccumulations play out, but yeah, we'll see. Okay. So that's currency pairs. Okay. Next up, we'll tap into gold. And by the way, if during the call you guys want me to go through something specific, just drop it in there. Even whatever type of asset it is, doesn't matter, stock, whatever, doesn't matter. Just let me know. Now we're gonna start off with gold. So obviously gold here, like we spoke about, huge, crazy sell-off, right? We really had, obviously buys happen here. I'm gonna go ahead and delete all this price action, or I'm just gonna delete my whole chart here actually. Okay. So yeah, so last week was here, right? We saw price, like I said, get into that opening week gap, right? Create that institutional down candle, and then we ended up taking entries in here for a beautiful buy, right? We called that out on Tuesday. That again is the video that is live on YouTube, so go ahead and check that out. And then we end up having, obviously this huge buy up, and that ends up being the top, right? Over here, there was definitely some pretty clean setups to be had on these smaller time frames, right? So I would say like from the 45-minute down here, this moment here, multiple institutional candles being created, 45-minute, right? 30-minute candle there, 15-minute candle there, 5-minute candle there, right? And this is right prior to New York opens. This is 9:25 a.m. 9:30 a.m. ends up bringing in the impulsive phase. Mitigation phase comes in after that, and then we dump, right? So honestly, pretty clean there at the top there for gold. But yeah, in terms of looking forward, we had the market dump off crazy. We had a rebalancing move, which was this move to the upside here. Price just continuing to dump and dump, right? Like I still think like I'm not gonna say like this is the end of anything, right? Or anything like that. But I still think that there's room for downside, right? We have a very long wick there on the 4 hour, right? Maybe if this current 4 hour gets completely engulfed in that wick, obviously if this next candle just ends up continuing, then all right, cool. Maybe we're bullish, so I'd kind of look at this as like a pretty key level, in terms of like us really breaking up and above there. And then we can kind of look for, reaccumulations to happen on smaller time frames potentially, if we get them. But what I can see is we do have a long wick and we do have a gap literally right underneath that long wick, right? So having that, and then, obviously when it comes to me, like even looking at like this on the daily time frame, like what's the real like last point of interest here, right? Daily wise, like these are just individual candles, When it comes to this here, I would say this there is our really last point of interest when it comes to the daily, right? We have that big sell-off, right? Institutional type candle. We sweep the low of that institutional candle. We continue to buy. This is our real last sell-off before we ended up, really, really buying up, right? So, potentially this area here on gold could actually end up being, like 4,500 and under. Maybe that can be where we can look for accumulations to happen. Maybe we even sweep that, right? But like that's where I would kind of see, that potentially happening. And again, like 4 hour wise, we just got a wick there, right? 2 hour wise, we have a wick there. We actually have a trap candle there that printed as well, right? 1 hour wise, we have a wick there, right? And then 30-minute wise, we start to get candles, right? Maybe this is where we do buy from if this is going to be an institutional candle on that 4 hour. But if not, then again, maybe the gap here, maybe a little bit lower down into here can be where we can start to look for signs of accumulation, to buy again, right? So we'll see what happens there with gold, right? If you guys do have entries or whatever that you didn't take profit on, I don't know what to tell you. But I mean, again, like obviously you should have runners. I'm not saying the runners are fine. Like this is kind of why we have like, runners in the first place is that we could take partials for the majority. But like, yeah, if you have them here or below, be careful because I would say it's a little bit too convenient to just have that buy just come up right after, now. You know what I mean? I don't think it'll happen. I think we're probably going to get a bunch of buyers come in when the market opens, and then I think we're going to sweep them out. And then from there, maybe later on in the week, we can look for the buys um there as well, right? One thing I forgot to talk about as well, shoot, is that this week is a big week, right? We have a lot of news this week, right? So obviously we have Monday we got news, Tuesday we got news, right? Wednesday we got news, Thursday we got news, but then Friday we got big news, right? First Friday of February means that it is NFP week. So before I move on, I just want to say, obviously we might get some moves happening with those other news events. There'll probably still be a lot of volatility, but whenever NFP week comes up, typically for me, especially early on in the week, I try to just look for base hits. What I mean by that, hit your 1 to 2s, hit your 1 to 3s, get a buffer going for yourself, right? Maybe even, don't really look for like home runs, like big moves necessarily early on in the week. Because typically, NFP ends up being what really, really shakes the market up, right? If the setup shows itself and like, whatever, take your partials, hold your runners. That's all I'm saying is just like try to accept base hits a little bit more with NFP weeks in general because NFP is, again, typically where we end up seeing the market do its crazy moves that can be bottoms, right? Let me see here. NFP big days. Time to see Pat in a suit again. Does he do that? I never seen that actually. Lean hogs. I don't know what that means, but corn? What? What are you guys talking about? Oh, you guys, you guys want me to look at the corn chart? Get out of here. All right. Anyways, um, we're gonna go ahead and continue in. So now you made me lose my train of thought with this corn nonsense. What are you guys going on about? But but yeah, potentially downside, short term, maybe upside later on. But yeah, just go ahead and, like just be patient, right? Because even if, we get like a crazy sweep, man, and we come all the way back up here, you don't need to catch the bottom, man. There's going to be reaccumulations that happen, right? That we're going to be able to take advantage of. Try and stay patient in environments like this. Like we were saying last week, individual candles on gold right now are insane, like tiny candles, 300 pips, 1 minute candles, 300 pips. Like you can't even trade this. Like even like, some people are trading gold on 0.01s and they have like $100 in their account. One candle, you got a third of your account gone. 0.01, $30 gone. One candle, you know? So just be cautious, right? This is the kind of environment we typically want to chill, stay away from a little bit more. Maybe we go away from gold. Maybe we start looking at indices and start looking at other stuff instead, right? Up to y'all though, that's up to y'all. Silver, okay. Silver really just died, like that's crazy to me. Like to go from like the here to here, like bam, crazy. 37% drop in a day or two, right? Kind of hitting like realistically the zones I was looking at. Like here we had our previous reaccumulation there. Not surprised we came here. Um, in terms of buys at open, again, it's like long wicks I don't like to play off of. I like to see strong, solid candles really play. So, maybe we come a bit lower even, as crazy as that sounds. Or maybe gold comes lower and silver holds this low, right? That's also still possible to get that divergence. But still, it's tough to say, guys. It's tough to say with things like this, you know, is this the bottom? Is it not? I would want to favor us to buy up a bit and then do it again and then go. Um, but yeah, like honestly, then it just becomes like where, this really is the last, daily zone that we had, what we tapped into here. This is that last daily zone there. The next one is all the way down here at 50. All these are trap candles, whatever. The next big one is all the way down here at 50. So it's like, imagine from 100 to 50, that'd be so cooked. But yeah, we'll see. Dropped hard. Yeah, exactly. Right now, I got a gem show in my city that's apparently one of the biggest in the world. So I'm trying to scam the vendors to sell me cheap gold and silver before it drops more and just tell them I'm a trader. I'm sure these guys are keeping an eye, but man, try it. Do your thing, man. Do your thing. You never know, man. You never know. But there's gonna be someone there that probably is scared and wants to get rid of their gold. This is definitely a fearful move here. Or their silver. So there's gotta be someone there that's feeling that way. So good luck to you. Good luck to you. Stack up those them assets, you know? Even some of them bought gold at the top with FOMO. I was surprised. Yeah, probably. Probably. I believe it. I didn't even know you spoke to them. So the fact you speak to them and they see that, yeah. I think things are going crazy, like we had it, like again, like I love to see stuff like that. And this is just kind of like having your finger on the pulse and investing in general where you see things like this. But like, you know, someone in the chat dropped like their parents messaged them on Thursday, right? Thursday's where we started, right before we started to see the drop. Oh, we need to buy silver. Their parents just messaging them like, oh, we got to buy gold. Like literally that day. That's how you know? Like let's start to rotate. You know what I mean? Let's start to get some caution going, you know? So that's silver. Okay. I mean, like, again, same thing with gold. Like, I wish I could give you guys a better thing, but like after a drop like this, it's like I would personally want to favor it not to hold, but this kind of is the zone, right? So maybe we do buy from here. If you were to look for buys, I'd probably like silver just a little bit better just because of that. Um, so maybe we focus on silver instead of gold, but gold, I don't really like as much. I think we have bigger targets to hit. I just think that silver already hit those kind of targets. Like this is like that same zone on gold is over here on silver, right? Like we obviously had already tapped into it with silver, right? But that same price action where we had the gap just below on gold, silver already hit. So, maybe silver ends up being the one that we focus on, right? But if we do get a swipe on gold, we'll probably see a swipe on silver anyways. So there's that. Okay, what's next? We talked about gold. So Bitcoin, all right. Bitcoin, man. Bitcoin, just being a scary guy, just being a very scary, scary feller. So yeah, so basically, obviously last week, like I said, just seeing order flow continue, right? Accumulation turned into a distribution. Very, very sus how this came up. Again, not showing us really signs of strength, more showing us, potential sweeps, right? And then seeing price sell off, right? Obviously we spoke about like, all right, could this be a sweep potentially, right? The way that we confirmed that is if we started to see, structure align and market manipulation align. And obviously that's what we did end up getting. So you could have caught some short-term buys here, right? But from there, we ended up seeing obviously a very, very clean distribution, I would say, really, really clean. Here, right? This really being that UTAD and then starting to see that walk down, super equal lows sitting at the bottom, right? Even from when price returned back for the UTAD, super equal lows here, right? So definitely was, a clean setup there. And again, being inside of a previous higher time frame zone that we had pointed out on Wyckoff Sundays, kind of gave it some validity as well. But yeah, then we dump like crazy. But like we spoke about, this is like really, like a potential zone where we could see buys, happen again, right? So here, let's delete this. So like obviously, here, this is where we had the previous reaccumulation, right? Distribution that turns into an accumulation here, right? And then here, obviously, we have our next distribution, that ended up happening there at the top, right? So now, right, you know, could this be potentially that we are accumulating here? Could this be that this whole thing is going to be a sweep and then we continue to buy up? Maybe, right? Like I think that it's worth taking shots down here. Or even like if we end up even sweeping this low, taking shots there. Because again, like even if this is like, like a what's it called? Like this could still be like a reaccumulation here and we could still sweep it even, right? We get that a lot with like external sweeps on liquidity and stuff like that, right? So like could we even see this being a point of liquidity that we externally sweep? It's possible, right? Even at the bottom there, we had pretty close lows there, potential double bottom almost, right? So, could be the case for that. And then, going ahead and seeing, price sweep that could happen. What I will say, I like the previous daily candle that we just had, right? I think that we do have potential for that previous daily candle to be an institutional candle, right? What's some of the things we can see here? Well, we obviously see this wick here. This is our wick low that we were kind of looking at to be liquidity, right? We can see the candle comes down, goes ahead and sweeps out all those buyers, right? We even see a wick there bounce off right before we sweep it. So again, just adds more liquidity to the move, right? We have the daily down candle happening there. All right. As we kind of scale in, right, we can kind of see even other institutional candles happening here, right? So when we go here, I would also call this 4 hour here a potential institutional candle relative to this low, right? We can see that the market ends up opening above the low, closing below it, right? And then after that, we don't really see too much, right? 4 hour, I would say we see it. Once we get to the 2 hour, we don't really have anything we can call institutional candles there, right? Big wicks right there to the downside on the 1 hour, big wick there on the 30-minute, right? Big wick there on the 15-minute, right? And yeah, even the 5, right? So really big wicks on multiple time frames when we talk about the bottom. So, that maybe gives the idea, like maybe we do end up getting the sweep on the bigger time frame low, right? Creating that external sweep on liquidity before we buy up. Or, we just end up holding the wick, right? Which does happen sometimes, right? That does happen sometimes. So yeah, it could be the case, right? Maybe even, now, like we could be seeing potential, things there, right? I think like these highs here could, potentially be kind of categorized as liquidity. Whoops, I was just kind of circle them. But yeah, like from here, like these three, right? Like maybe we're seeing liquidity kind of build up before we end up seeing a buy back up. Sunday typically can end up being big days in the crypto market. So maybe we'll end up seeing there. So like if we end up like basically, let me see here. It looks like we're starting a nice macro accumulation on BTC for my eyes. My guess is phase B. What do you think? 74K to 67K is the liquidity I see. Any lower, I feel like my portfolio is cooked. Go ahead and drop your chart. I don't know what you mean by phase B just yet. Go ahead and drop your chart, and I'll look at it. And then we'll talk about kind of the other things there as well. But yeah, so, even here, right, just kind of from a short-term perspective, right? Actually, I guess we shouldn't be doing that. This Wyckoff here is Wyckoff Sundays here, right? So we're doing bigger time frame here. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting zone, right? If this 4 hour can get engulfed back up, then maybe we do have an example of potential, like buys, coming in for long term on BTC, right? This is a very extreme area, right? Maybe if this 4 hour candle here even gets engulfed, that'd be even better. Actually, no, it probably won't because we only have 6 minutes left in that candle. So not the best time to buy when we're like, so, close to the end of a candle or anything like that. So honestly, guys, since it was such a big wick there and stuff, maybe we do get that. Maybe we do get that sweep on that bigger time frame low there, right? And that ends up just being an internal sweep on liquidity. Sorry, external sweep on liquidity, and then we end up seeing price, buy right back up from those zones, right? Um, but yeah, again, I said it last week, I'll say it this week, and not a great look. Not a great look for a BTC, right? Um, Now, that being said, we do have another accumulation zone down here. Maybe we want to continue there. But honestly, guys, if we start to break below here and we don't see a sweep, we see weakness, we see price chilling, I'm going to be scared. Yeah, I'm going to be scared of a potential, bear run. It could happen, right? It could definitely happen. That being said, like, ETH never broke highs the way I thought they would, right? Or like it just barely broke highs or whatever, right? We'll see, man. We'll see. That's all I could say, right? Like, never great to see, big buys up, right? Before we want to go ahead and buy like that. It's not the best because it's like, that's how manipulation typically looks, right? This was a lot better of a setup that happened last year, given how we had the base kind of set up, right? We were chilling and then we ended up doing that, right? Granted, we did kind of have a big buy up before we sold off, right? But, I would say like, even though there is kind of that potential for the bear run or whatever, market structure, like where we are right now as of February 1st, market structure has not broken, right? So although it looks scary, although it looks fearful, we still can look for those buy opportunities. We still can look for those things until we really can confirm that that bear market has come in on the bigger time frame wise, so that's what I would say, you know. Let me see here. Just made a clean chart, closing the liquidity I see. Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so literally the exact same thing that I'm thinking, so like if we actually end up seeing a sweep on that low there, right, to then actually from there get an external sweep that ends up continuing to buy up, that could be the case. And then we kind of go for these highs over here, right? Could be the case, right? As I kind of look at that lower time frame price action in here, does look pretty weak, right? It does look like big wicks. It does look like, not great institutional candles. Only on the daily do we really get a clean down candle. And then the 4 hour, we kind of get a clean down candle. Everything else, we don't get it. So because of that reason, maybe I'll lean towards us actually sweeping below, sadly. Right? So scary times, scary times. Scary times. That's what I have marked up too. Really the lowest I see us going right now. Yeah, we'll see. I would love to see it more just be a sweep, right? I think that it still makes sense. I think that people are really fearful. I think people are really excited about gold and people aren't paying attention to BTC. So I think that can really give us the indication here. And I also think that a lot of people will call bear market too if that low gets taken. Just because people will be like, oh no, breaking structure, and then it just ends up being an external sweep, and then we keep going. I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised, right? So personally, guys, I'm on your side, right? I do agree with what you guys are thinking. Let's just get the right price action in the right areas, higher time frame to lower time frame, and then see if we can position ourselves. And if you're a long-term, position kind of investor, then, still good to dollar cost average in this area. Because I think even if we do get a bear market, we probably will get a relief bounce or something like that, at least back up into where we started to sell off last week, or even, higher up to where this extreme area was, even if we are in a bear market, right? So I don't think it is, but we shall see. We shall see. We shall see. Only time will tell. We got to play devil's advocate always, right? What I want to see is another strong push down with an IC before a long-term markup. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to see too. So that's crypto. All right. Fearful times. Fearful times. So maybe that's a good thing. All right. Now let's tap into indices. Okay. I actually want to touch on, obviously first let's start with NASDAQ though. So obviously with NASDAQ, what we've kind of been seeing, what we kind of been talking about has been, obviously we had, like this external sweep on liquidity. And since then, hold on, let me see here. So essentially to me, this is a recent low. This recent low looks like STM phase B. Just drop your chart for me, right? That's what I would love to see charts. All right. So here we've got low to high, right? Price goes ahead and sweeps that external liquidity, right? If we get the same kind of thing on BTC, that's the kind of thing we'd want to see, right? Even though we did have like a reaccumulation here, just like BTC had its own reaccumulation, seeing a swipe of that could still happen, right? So I think that that's probably what will end up happening with BTC. We'll see. But anyways, we're talking about NASDAQ now. So NASDAQ, big push down, right? We were kind of looking at that as a potential external sweep on liquidity. And ever since we've had that external sweep on liquidity, the only evidence that we've been seeing has been reaccumulation after reaccumulation, right? So distribution here turning into accumulation there, right? Distribution here turning into accumulation there, right? And so on and so forth. And we did kind of look at, even this as a distribution that turned into an accumulation, right? It might just be a short-term one. So we did get a rally, from last week with that push, right? We had price gap down, get below the lows, and then we just had a huge rally for the rest of the week. You know, since we've had that rally, the market definitely, obviously we saw the drop off, right? And it started to look a little bit scarier to me, right? Why do I say that? Because, one of the reasons we were looking for those buys in the first place was like just all this constant, like, I wouldn't even use a trend line for that. I'd probably use this. All this constant liquidity, just kind of sitting above, right? And then, getting price go ahead and stall out here and then getting such an explosive buy up, right? What did we do here? We didn't even break the high, but what we did do is we broke every single piece of internal liquidity possible. Like these highs, that high there, every single piece of internal liquidity ended up, getting taken with NASDAQ, right? While at the same time taking all these highs that were set up for such a long time. So I'm like a little scared of it just because of that, right? In terms of like us really holding order flow, right? Typically when we see this, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, we're in a huge bear market or anything like that. All it can necessarily mean though is like when we get sweeps like that is that maybe short term we don't hold the order flow that we think we're going to hold like this, right? Maybe we don't even hold the order flow like that, right? Maybe we actually end up getting down and below these lows, sticking with the external sweep, and then from there going, right? And I know that sounds crazy, but when I even look at things like US 30, right? Which looks even more like this, to be honest. I mean, like, obviously, I was trying to look for buys last week, right? But like, bro, look at this. Like, this is just too much, and having that while also having, a distribution at the top, and like maybe this is an accumulation here that, we kind of reaccumulated. But when we look at it too, firstly, the first thing I see with this reaccumulation, big wick at the bottom, right? Not an institutional candle, right? 2 hour we start to see them, right? And then I think 1 hour we start to see them and stuff, right? But at least 4 hour wise, no candle there, right? Um, and like what's it called? Like again, just big like trend line to the downside just makes it look so scary because we didn't actually like break a high from after having created that um sorry. So we didn't even break the highs here after having created this low here, right? So it's like, can this be a trap structure wise, right? Where people see the big buy up and they decide, okay, yeah, this is our higher low. We're gonna go ahead and continue. But remember, we can't call something a higher low until it actually creates a higher high, right? We can kind of look at the price action and be like, okay, this is likely to hold because it has a nice accumulation, has a nice sweep. We can make plays off of that, right? Especially if we get multiple accumulations in the same zone, right? But, that being said, from a strictly structure perspective, that is not great, right? Does that mean we're going to be long term doing this and like, holding? No, right? I think that we still have liquidity sitting to the upside. I think we have big wicks sitting to the upside. I think even here we have liquidity that's kind of being created. So long term, do I think we can buy? Yeah, for sure. Right. But again, kind of similar to NAS, maybe we just don't buy the way that we think. Maybe we just don't hold order flow the way that we think. Maybe we start to get some internal sweeps on liquidity, right? Before we actually get the real move. And again, like just seeing how this happened and stuff, it just kind of makes me a little nervous again, you know, to like look for buys necessarily here or look for buys even down here necessarily. I have a feeling we might break order flow. And, that's just kind of me, with this coming up. And again, with US 30 looking like this, I mean, not great, I would say. Right. So if we do decide to hold order flow, if we do, then this is going to be an area to look at. Right. Coming back into that previous zone manipulation, this could technically be a type 1 setup, right? Um, but yeah, that's all I'm saying is like, just kind of playing that devil's advocate and also just kind of seeing like, there's reason to. I'm not just playing it out of nowhere. I feel like there was a lot less reason to when price was like over here last week, or sorry, I think when price opened, yeah, we were there. Yeah. So price opened here last week, we had another reaccumulation happen there. We're like, okay, maybe we continue, right? But so far, kind of just taking that low. So I don't know, guys. We'll see, right? But all I'm saying is like I wouldn't be surprised to see some of this trend line get taken, and then we end up seeing the buy back up happen. Personally, that's what I would want to wait for on indices. And if we did get that, I would be excited. I would be really excited. I would think that we're probably going to end up seeing these highs get taken. I think it's high probability, and I think I would personally use US 30 to do so, right? So US 30 is what I want to keep an eye on for this week. For potential buys later on. Maybe closer to the end of the week. Right. And I would love it, especially if we held these highs and then we got the sweep and then we can continue to hold that for maybe some long-term buys there. Right. So my fingers are crossed for something like that. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much the main things I'm thinking for now. I think we're just overall in the market, I think we're just in a very, you know, middle ground place. I feel like things could go either way. And especially just given that NFP is coming and the fact that the market looks like that, and it looks like things can go either way, chances are what I think is that we're probably inside of an enticing phase right now, right? When things start to look that way, it can go either way, and we have big major news coming, you know, I think that kind of gives signs that maybe we're in an enticing phase and maybe we're going to want to see some big moves happen that actually go ahead and sweep out some people before we end up getting the real move happening. So go ahead and wait, see when that manipulation phase happens, right? Chances are it's going to be aligned with one of these news events, if not probably NFP, right? So we'll see, right? Obviously, we're gonna, go live Tuesday to Thursday, to just kind of see how things are looking in the market day to day, and help you guys and guide you guys through that. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much gonna be it, from me for the main pairs that I like to review. Let me go ahead and tap into your link here. And also, if you guys have anything else you want me to look at last minute, let me know. But that's just kind of what I'm seeing. Oh, okay, Bitcoin. Oh, I thought you were talking about indices. My bad. So yeah, it could be, SC, right? AR, right? ST, ST. ST and phase B, maybe we come up, maybe we distribute, and then we spring, right? I think that could make sense, right? So I'm seeing what you're seeing. I could see that making sense, right? And we'll see how things go. We'll see how things go. Only time will tell, but I like your markup. Fire, thank you. Indices make a lot of sense to me. Awesome. Awesome. So yeah, we'll see how this all plays out. Hopefully we had, such a good, Wyckoff Sundays as we did last week. And yeah, guys, I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, guys, much love, much appreciation. And yeah, peace out.